Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 8th day of the month of Tevet, 5778, December the 26th, 2017. And this Shabbat, the ultimate final Torah portion of the book of Bereshit, parashat Vayechi. Rabbi Chaim and Richman here together in the studio with Yitzchak, Reuven. Got a lot to talk about in today's Temple Talk. First of all, today is the 8th day of the month of Tevet, and actually it is a day of significance. In fact, there are 3 days in succession in this month of Tevet that are noteworthy, that our sages have marked as being days of very serious introspection. In fact, there was a time in history when folks had a stronger constitution, when people used to fast all 3 days, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th. But nowadays, most people fast only on the 10th day of Tevet. That's coming up. It's going to be observed on Thursday, because the 10th day of Tevet commemorates the day when the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar first began a siege around the city of Jerusalem, and he beleaguered that city. He sieged against Jerusalem for 3 years until the walls of the city were broken. In the month of Tammuz, 3 years later, that led to the destruction of the temple. But before that, today, the 8th of Tevet, and tomorrow, the 9th of Tevet, are also significant days. Today is the day that the famous incident wherein King Ptolemy, that's a silent P, King Ptolemy of Egypt, commissioned 70 of Israel's greatest sages to translate the Torah into Greek. That resulted in what is known as the Septuagint. And our sages are extremely harsh in their analysis of the spiritual ramifications and spiritual havoc that this event wrought, the translation of the Torah into Greek. And basically, that has to do with the fact that when you have something like a translation, you may think you understand it, but it is still flawed at the best of translations, and it is basically a type of illusion. When one thinks that they have their own understanding of Torah, they can also take it to all sorts of places that they want to go to according to their agenda. So that's always a danger. It has very, very deep spiritual ramifications for today as well. The more you think about it, the more you understand that this refers to the idea of people basically manipulating theology for their own aims, is what this day is all about. The 9th day of the month of Tevet is also a very solemn day. That's the day of the passing, the death of the great Jews, Ezra and Nehemiah, who brought back Babylonian Jewry, and who were the sincere and selfless leadership of that time. And so their deaths sends us into a tailspin, and it is a time of reflecting on the dearth of true leadership and what real Jewish leadership is all about. I got to tell you, all these themes have a way of surfacing and interfacing in our lives today. Parashat Vayechi. Yaakov gathers together all of his numerous progeny. Yosef, having been reunited already with Yaakov and with the brothers now for 17 years in the land of Egypt, Yaakov is about to leave this world, calls together his children, and he's about to tell them everything that will befall them leading up to the coming of the Messiah and the redemption. And then suddenly he loses the moment. The divine inspiration is withdrawn from him. The prophetic inspiration, God takes it away, and instead of giving his totally messianic giveaway of the clues that he was going to tell them, he instead uses the opportunity to tailor-make a very personal and intimate blessing for each one of his children, the tribes of Israel. although that's not what he ended up saying to Shimon and Levi looks like, or Reuven for that matter. But actually they were all blessings, and they all had messianic portent as well. So this is actually one of the most famous mysteries in Torah, I think. We could safely say that. The idea of why it is that we read here in parashat Vayechi as follows. Yaakov summons together his children and it's actually the beginning of chapter 49, the book of Genesis. And then Jacob called for his sons and said, "Assemble yourselves, and I will tell you what will befall you in the end of days. Gather yourselves and listen, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father." But then he goes and he gives these really amazing, powerful, portentous blessings. But frankly, they have nothing to do with the previous verses. They are not about the end of days, at least ostensibly. And so this is a very famous idea, and our sages comment, Rashi cites, that he was about to tell them, reveal to them everything that they need to know about exactly when the redemption is coming and what will lead up to it and what it's going to be like and everything, all the roadmap details that you want to know, that everybody wants to know when Mashiach is coming, right? But it was withdrawn from him, and he lost it. And he didn't know why, and he was afraid that maybe it had to do with one of his children being unworthy. And according to the Midrashic account, this occasion is the birth of Shema Yisrael, the birth of the declaration, which is the hallmark of all Jewish credo and faith. Hear, O Israel, Hashem, our God, Hashem is one. According to Midrash, it was born at this moment because the boys sensed that Yaakov was afraid that maybe it was because one of them or more of them was not worthy of hearing this information. And so they said to him, "Hear, O Israel," right, which is Israel, Yaakov, the Hashem that you believe in is the same Hashem that we believe in. So there he is on his deathbed. He saw something, that's for sure. I don't know what it was exactly. Maybe, for all I know, he saw the days that we're living in, fraught with all of this angst, all of this divisiveness, which is a very bad thing. The divisiveness that affects Israel and the world, for that matter. Maybe he decided it wasn't time. Maybe something was bothering him. Obviously, there's enough going on in my world this week for me to be able to say that. So here in this week of the 8th and the 9th and the 10th of Tevet, and everything that implies, you know, again, recalling that Tevet is again a month that is fixated on the Holy Temple. It was begun in the latter days of Hanukkah. So the month began with that brilliant and beautiful light of illumination of the hidden light of creation. That's how we began the month. But now already we're kind of like doing a somersault into a much more somber and introspective and sad, anguish-laden concentration on the temple, which is the 10th of Tevet, which is the siege against Jerusalem. Of course, and again, what did Yaakov see? What didn't he see that led him to withhold information? You know, this whole concept of the siege against Jerusalem is so totally apropos. It's like chilling. I mean, it's like you can't write this as a script, you know, and you can't make this up, because I can't imagine a subject that is more absolutely relevant than the subject of the siege against Jerusalem. Because, you know, maybe the antagonists or nationalities have changed their names, but the whole world basically is up in arms against the Jewish claim to Jerusalem, and moreover, they're up in arms with President Trump for declaring that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and so 128 nations were in defiance of Trump at the United Nations, where the United Nations of course, we in Israel are used to the UN lambasting us, attacking us with vitriol and accusing us of all sorts of things. But here, basically, they decided that they're going to actually make a resolution against the President of the United States, against the United States. And he took that quite personally. He said, we're going to remember this day of everybody who came against us. I'm going to remember every face. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to have a list of those who are naughty and those who are nice. And I'm going to exact some sort of, he didn't say that, but he said, we're going to remember. And that's what he had UN Ambassador Nikki Haley say. And the fact is, that the United States has announced that it will be trimming the massively inflated budget that it gives to the United Nations by at least $285 million, I think is what it's being considered. A lot of people are very upset. Like I said, 128 nations defied Trump and voted against America. I think 35 abstained, and I think 9 or so were in favor. And one of those nations, let's give them some accolades right now. One of those nations, my favorite nation and yours. They're here tonight. Give them a hand. President Jimmy Morales and his wonderful country of Guatemala made history, of course. Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the PA, said he's on the wrong side of history. But the Guatemalan president, Jimmy Morales, made history by being the first country to announce that they are moving their embassy to United Jerusalem.
3 cheers.
Now, you know what? That's a real friend. I tell you. And of course, then we read the history that some of us might have forgotten, that Guatemala was actually very influential in the establishment of the State of Israel. Mm-hmm. So Guatemala was always there for us. And you know what? By golly, I'm going to be there for them too.
And they have a beautiful flag. It features the bird of paradise on it.
Well, I'm glad that a country as nice as Guatemala, headed by as plucky, resilient and stalwart and courageous a man as Jimmy Morales, has a nice flag. But let me just say that our own Tzipi Chotoveli of the Foreign Ministry has said that there are another 10 nations that are mulling, that Israel is in touch with. Israel is in contact with at least 10 nations. Some names have been floated. Yes. I don't know if I should say it in case people... Wait. I don't know if you should say this. No. Oh, no. Czechia said that they actually said publicly.
Romania?
But now we're talking about Slovakia, possibly Romania, possibly Togo. And maybe Micronesia. Some other countries that might follow suit and move their embassies to Jerusalem. Why? Because it is the right thing to do. On the other hand, the Pope, in his address yesterday on December 25th, said that Jerusalem is the whole problem. That he was praying for the children of Jerusalem who are being in the middle of this terrible situation, and he's praying, and he says everyone should pray for a 2-state solution. The thing is, Pope, this is the big lie, and you are just either buying into that or representing it and propagating and proponing it, because when Jerusalem was in Arab hands and under Arab control, there was no peace. And again, the lie that Jerusalem was ever anything to anyone but the Jewish people. How come the Palestinian Arabs never claimed Jerusalem as a capital before? How come they never claimed any capital? Of course, because they're actually not a people. But the fact is, Jerusalem was never an Arab capital. And this whole thing is so amazing, this incredible lie. The Turk, Erdogan is fomenting riots on the Temple Mount. Last Friday, 45,000 people rioting on the Temple Mount, of which a certain number, they said a couple thousand of them were Turkish citizens.
Turkish tourists. In fact, Israel just deported 2 Turkish tourists
who attacked some Israeli policemen.
Yes.
And Erdogan said that if Netanyahu would only have called me first,
No, if
No,
Trump,
I'm sorry.
Trump would have called him first.
Sorry, sometimes I get them confused. If Trump would have called me first, he never would have declared Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel. This stuff is so absurd that if it was a routine on a late night television show, it couldn't get funnier. In the meantime, the PA is going to be boycotting America. I'm sure America's very upset, but the PA rejects the United States as an honest broker now, as an arbiter, because they obviously can't be trusted, because they're taking Israel's side, so they can't be trusted. So Trump responds, and he says, at least this is what I've read, that so far he is not releasing a peace plan. Not that they're not working on it, his team of Kushner and Greenblatt, but he is not rushing anymore with the peace plan because, and maybe not at all, because Abbas is not going to accept it anyway. And in fact, Trump had released a new policy paper after, I think he had been working on it before, but after the whole thing with the reaction to his declaration on Jerusalem and the United Nations vehement
denial of American sovereignty.
Of American sovereignty, right. Basically, it's one thing to say that Israel has no right to declare its own capital, which of course we're supposed to be used to by now. But the United States definitely was very upset with the United Nations, implying that the United States doesn't have the right to decide where it wants its embassy to be. So, and that was a direct attack against American sovereignty. So anyway, so Trump issued this policy paper. I don't know if you read it. I want to quote directly from the paper, because this is absolutely history-making and a total precedent. And in the paper it states, "For generations, the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians has been understood as the prime irritant preventing peace and prosperity in the region." The draft of the document obtained by the AP reads in part. "Today, the threats from radical jihadist terrorist organizations and the threat from Iran are creating the realization that Israel is not the cause of the region's problems. States have increasingly found common interests with Israel in confronting common threats." End quote. This is such a radical departure from Obamian diplomacy and all previous administrations for so many years, because basically he's coming in the light of day, Trump, in this paper, and he's saying, listen, Israel's not the problem, and it never was the problem. Now, of course, again, just yesterday, the Pope spoke to however many hundreds of thousands of people, and he said Israel is the whole problem. There has to be a two-state solution, right? And here Trump is saying it's got nothing to do with Israel. It never had anything to do with Israel. The problem is the radical jihadist terrorist organizations and the threat from Iran. Enter Obama and his deliberate sanitization, whitewashing, knighthood of Iran, and his devious, manipulative channels through which he basically facilitated Hezbollah in the United States, even, because he did not want to alienate Iran, because it was so important to him to be able to say that he reinstated Iran into the international community. And now the latest from the newsroom is that Iran has a physical, not even a virtual or a veritable, but a physical backdoor bridge into Israel through Syria. Mm-hmm. And so basically we are really facing a stepped-up Iranian threat, and that's all thanks to Obama.
All thanks to Obama, who the news came out, was broken last week by Politico, an investigation by Politico about a 9-year joint CIA and DEA investigations into Hezbollah mafia-like connections and intrigue, in which money was being laundered via used cars from the United States being shipped by the thousands into African states, and millions of dollars being laundered through the United States, and millions of dollars worth of cocaine being brought into the United States, all for the profit of Hezbollah. And the investigators claim they had hard evidence and witnesses who were willing to testify in order to bring down the top people in Hezbollah and Iran, and all their requests for official permission to continue the investigation were always turned down by the Obama administration, which did not want to ruffle the feathers of Iran. So there you go, America.
Kol hakavod, though, really, hats off to America for recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, a perfect gift for this season of temple consciousness, and the perfect answer to the whole concept of the 10th day of Tevet, which is about the siege against Jerusalem, because that siege is being perpetuated basically by all those nations who refuse to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And hats off to Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales, who in the face of the contempt of the world said, I'm going to be the first to move my embassy. And I got to tell you something really that struck me, Yitzchak, when I read that 128 nations defied Trump and joined and supported the resolution in the spiritually, politically, morally bankrupt UN against America for that declaration. That reminded me, that number 128, it reminded me of the 127 provinces that sat down at Achashverosh's idolatrous banquet in the opening verse of the Scroll of Esther. And so this is like one nation better than that orgy of, is that a hard G or a soft G? I never knew, because I don't have a lot of occasion to use the word orgy. Orgy?
Orgy, yeah.
127 nations participated in that idolatrous orgy of blasphemy against Hashem, and now 128 nations took part in this idolatrous orgy in the UN of blasphemy against Hashem. And yes, that UN resolution was a blasphemy against Hashem.
And when was that first orgy, the one in Esther's time, take place? What nation? What state?
Ancient Persia, present-day Iran.
Present-day Iran. Isn't that something?
And yes, I call this 128 vote against America a blasphemous orgy of idolatry against Hashem, because Jerusalem is representative singly of Hashem's light in this world. Jerusalem is the city of God. Jerusalem represents God's presence. The heart of Jerusalem is the holy temple with the Shekhinah, the divine presence shining forth. That's exactly what the United Nations is trying to stop. It's exactly what Abbas is trying to stop. It's exactly why Abbas wants to boycott America now. And I'm sure that Americans are very, very upset about that. Stay with us on Temple Talk as we continue our very focused, honed rant. And as we continue to bring you the truth from the city of God, the eternal, undivided capital of the Jewish people, I say unabashedly, together with my friend Jimmy Morales of Guatemala, Jerusalem. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with me in the studio here in Jerusalem, Rabbi Chaim Richman. Today is the 8th day of the month of Tevet, 5778. It's the 26th of December, 2017. This coming Shabbat's parashat is parashat Vayechi. And, we've been talking all about
Tevet and Trump.
Tevet and Trump, yeah. The big T's. Tevet, today's the 8th. The day that the Torah was originally translated into Greek, the Septuagint. And we've talked about that. And we've talked about what tomorrow and the next day are going to bring. And we've also talked about Yaakov's, his revelation of the final days to his sons, or was it?
His canceled revelation.
His canceled revelation. Or was it? I wonder if we're just not getting it. But you know what? If the world today is in some sort of proximity to the end of days, and I can understand why you might have held back. You know, you were talking about all the crazy players out there today, right? I think you gave much due credit and kudos to Jimmy Morales, the president of Guatemala. I'd like also to...
I love that man.
To 3 cheers for Nikki Haley.
Oh, yes, of course.
Who is wonderfully articulate representative of the United States in the UN, and she seems to be setting the tone for what's going down in the UN these days.
She said, I don't even understand why Israel is a member here. And by the way, Israel has formally left UNESCO.
Yes. UNESCO, that fun-loving organization of the UN, which
Science and culture.
right, which what's the word? I'm at loss for words today, Rabbi. Which just rejects any
Connection to the Jewish
between
people.
the Jewish people and anything here in Israel.
Oh, yeah, Rachel's tomb, the tomb of our
knee-jerk
patriarchs.
rejection. Speaking of the deplorables, right? I got to read this.
Wait a
New
minute,
York
who are you
Times.
talking about?
We're talking about the knee-jerk
Everybody.
rejectors of UNESCO. UNESCO. Of course I'm talking about UNESCO and all the other horrible players out there, the 128 nations that voted against
Oh, so they're the
United
ones that
States.
you're calling deplorables.
Of course, come on. The New York Times, big supporters, of course, of the Obama program with Iran, defend it to this day, and I haven't heard a peep out of them actually concerning the Politico investigation and revelation of the
Politico.
of Obama administration's quashing of the investigation into Iranian crimes, worldwide crimes.
No, Iranian crimes in America.
In America,
Through
yes,
Hezbollah.
yes, cocaine, money laundering, et cetera, et cetera. In the New York Times, apparently the New York Times offers tourism packages. So they have one now, which they write about. It's called Iran Tales from Persia. It sounds very romantic, exotic.
Arabian Nights.
Arabian Nights kind of thing, yeah. And they are offering, it costs a number of thousands of dollars, they're offering a tour through Iran.
A package
Persia,
to Iran.
Iran. This is the blurb. For 2,500 years, this powerful country has entranced, mystified, and beguiled the world. Discover the ancient secrets and modern complexities of this influential land on a 13-day itinerary, etc., etc. In fact, one of the
Sponsored by the
places
New
that
York
you
Times?
visit also is the hometown of the Ayatollah Khomeini. What a place to visit. You can't miss it. You got to go there. Anyway, and then it does have a little qualifier here. It says, though Iran often rejects Western ways and is frequently under fire for its positions on human rights, its nuclear program, and Israel, its role as a birthplace of civilization cannot be denied. So who wouldn't want to go there? I mean, okay, so there's sometimes don't agree with the United States.
This is sponsored by the New York Times, or
This is the a New York Times. Yes, I think they have. I think some of their journalists,
It's a project of
some
the
of their
New York
writers
Times?
actually lead the tours. I think. Yes.
Wow.
This is their thing, the New York Times. And so sometimes they're under fire because of their policies toward Israel or human rights. Really, I mean, imagine 1938, New York Times having a tour of Germany. A cultural leader. They were the most advanced culture of Europe, or the most advanced culture on planet Earth. The exotic city of Berlin. I don't know. This is sick, Rabbi. This is really sick. There is no. These
There's no
people
moral
have,
compass.
There's no moral compass. They've totally lost it. They've totally. So when you say, the end of days. Maybe what Yaakov Avinu, our father Yaakov, was really saying was that, like, you guys, you have no idea. I couldn't even begin to put it into words what I'm seeing here in my
So you're
mind's
saying
eye.
he was like saying, like, you don't want to know.
You don't want
You
to
don't
know,
really
and
want to
I
know.
don't even know how to articulate these things. It's so inside out, so insane.
I gotta tell you, I was thinking about the Right Honorable First Earl of Beaconsfield. And when I say the Right Honorable First Earl of Beaconsfield, of course, I'm referring to Benjamin Disraeli, who was twice the British Prime Minister. So he was once taunted by Daniel O'Connell in the House of Lords. And he was insulted because he was Jewish. So there's a very famous quote from Benjamin Disraeli, first Earl of Beaconsfield and the British Prime Minister. This was back in the late 1800s. He answered Daniel O'Connell. He said, "Yes, I am a Jew, and when the ancestors of the right honorable gentleman were brutal savages in an unknown island, mine were priests in the Temple of Solomon."
There must have been a hush.
Now, there's another tradition of this quotation that says that what he actually said was, while your ancestors were painting themselves blue, my ancestors were worshiping one God. Because as everybody knows, the Picts, early inhabitants of Scotland, did paint themselves blue. Anyway,
why not?
Why am I thinking of the Right Honorable First Earl of Beaconsfield, Benjamin Disraeli, and his quick, witty comeback about the Right Honorable Gentleman's ancestors being brutal savages in an unknown island, while mine were priests in the Temple of Solomon? I'll tell you why I'm thinking of that. Because here's Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, our patriarch, lying on his deathbed. All his sons, the tribes of Israel, all around. They are. It's a star-studded evening, and it was God who told Abraham, Jacob's grandfather, that they'll be like the stars. And they are going off into the future, into their destiny. And the amazing thing is that back in parashat Vayechi, in Genesis chapter 28, Yaakov Avinu, Vayechi Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Harana. Jacob goes out from Beersheva and he goes towards Haran, and he encounters the place.
Right.
He touches upon the place, right? And he goes to sleep there. He takes from the rocks of the place and he puts them under his head and he sleeps in that place. I'm referring, of course, beginning in verse 10 of chapter 28 of the book of Genesis. Jacob alights at the Temple Mount because God brought him there because the day ended early. And there he has this dream, and he sees a ladder, and the ladder is extending into heaven, and God is at the top of the ladder. Angels of God are going up and down. God is at the top of the ladder, and he says, "I'm God. I am Hashem, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Yitzchak." And he says, "This land that you're lying upon, to you will I give it, and to your offspring. And your offspring shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall spread out powerfully westward, eastward, northward, and southward, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your offspring." So it's like so ironic, and all I can think of is Disraeli's comeback. While your ancestors were swinging through the trees, is how I once heard it. Mine were serving as priests in the Temple of Solomon. You got 128 nations. Basically, some of them are still swinging from the trees. Some of them are still brutal savages. And those that aren't brutal savages are still also brutal savages in their own way, because that's what makes the world go round. And they're sitting in that den of iniquity, in that hall of lies, in that hall of historical revisionism and every kind of corruption and manipulation under the sun. And they're basically saying, no, Jerusalem isn't the capital of Israel, and the United States has no right to say that it is, because we're going to just buy into this whole malodorous lie, and the Pope is going to stand there on his balcony, and he's going to say that only a two-state solution will bring peace to the region. But basically, it's a one-state solution that these nations and the Pope wants, which is one state, which is the state of Palestine and the destruction of Israel. And then again, the lie. Where do we start talking about it? The fact that the PLO was founded in 1964. There was no territories, and Jerusalem was under the rule of Jordan, the holy places in Jerusalem, and it just doesn't stop how history is manipulated and rewritten. So this is what I have to say about Disraeli's comeback to Daniel O'Connell. While these nations have the audacity, the unmitigated gall to speak through their cloaks, so deep down distinguished, about about Jewish history and to sever any connection of the Jews to this city, of which, I mean, what other people in the world, okay, my goodness, Thursday, we have a worldwide fast that all Israelite descendants are going to be observing about the siege against Jerusalem. Tell me something. Who cares about Jerusalem? Do the Palestinians, do the English and the French and all the hypocrites that voted against the United States' resolution against the United States for condemning the United States for recognizing Jerusalem? Does anybody have that kind of sensitivity or connection to anything in this world that the Jews have to Jerusalem, that we are bemoaning and fasting and afflicting ourselves because of a siege that took place thousands of years ago against the city? That's a connection to Jerusalem. That's why, because Jerusalem means something to us. So here we are in this week, and Yaakov is leaving the stage now, and we're about to say, be strong, and let us be strengthened, and say goodbye, conclude the book of Genesis. And we're about to plunge ourselves into the darkness of Egyptian exile. We'll begin the book of Exodus next week. And Yaakov is gathering his children around, and he's telling them, like you said, everything about what's going on right now. Yaakov is saying, like, you want to hear a good one? He says, no, you know what? You know what? I'm not even going to go there. And their boys are like, what, Abba, you were going to say something. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Is it something I said? Is it us? And he's saying, no, you know what? You can't make this stuff up. I was going to tell you something about what I see in 5778 about a character named Trump and Jimmy Morales and what the world is doing, but you'll best see for yourselves. And then, because he's thinking, wait a minute, they're all going to come against my children in the United Nations and say that Jerusalem has no Jewish connection, when I was lying on that spot of the Temple Mount where Erdogan is sending his rabble now to protest against Jerusalem. I lied there and I saw God at the top of a ladder. And he said, this is your land. This is your land. I mean, this is where Disraeli got his comeback from. This is the truth. So this is much, much better than Disraeli saying to Daniel O'Connell, while your ancestors were brutal savages in some island, mine were in the Temple of Solomon. No, I say, while all these 128 hypocritical blankety blanks in the UN are doing their thing, Yaakov is lying on the Temple Mount. And Hashem is saying, this land is yours, way before these people were even a possibility. That's how long and rich and uninterrupted is the Jewish connection to this land. So God bless Donald Trump and Nikki Haley and Jimmy Morales and all the people that are willing to take a stand for the side of right and truth in the world, because apparently it's not easy to do that anymore, or it never was.
Amen. Rabbi, not only did Yaakov, as you just described, talk about these things and share them with his sons, but he, as they say today, put his money where his mouth is, so to speak, and he insisted that he himself be buried, not in Egypt, not in exile, but that he be buried with his fathers in the Machpelah cave in Hebron. And he swore his son Yosef to see to it that would be done, which is recorded also in this parashat. And the Egyptians first mourned Yaakov, and then an entourage of the Israelites and Egyptians went into the land of Israel, and Yaakov was buried. And in fact, you and I and some guests here, we visited that spot just a few weeks ago, the Machpelah, and saw exactly where Yaakov Avinu is buried. And then, of course, Yosef himself had his brothers promise him that when they would eventually leave Egypt and return to the land of Israel, that they would take his bones up out of Egypt and rebury them in Israel. And of course, they did, and that's the tomb of Yosef, Kever Yosef, which is in Shechem, which was visited by hundreds and hundreds of Jews during Hanukkah. Their candles, the Chanukiah candles, were lit there. Anyway, so again, even in this dark exile, which was just beginning, these giants of our past made statements not only in their lives but in their deaths. that this land is our land, and it belongs to us, and we belong to it. And nothing under the sun could possibly sever that connection. And it doesn't matter who says what nation declares what, or what pope, or what this or what that has to say. This is the reality, and all Donald Trump did was recognize it. All he did was say, yeah, you know what? It can't be denied anymore. This happens to be the truth. Jerusalem happens to be the capital of the state of Israel, happens to belong to the Jewish nation. Why are you people deceiving yourselves?
Abbas is so angry, and the Arab world is so angry that they should say that. It's like, you're no longer a trusted arbiter.
It's like the emperor's new clothes. You're just supposed to go along with the charade.
How dare you? Right.
How dare you? How dare you?
And I got to tell you, maybe I'm being too dramatic. Maybe I see things too deeply. Maybe I'm obsessed with the Holy Temple. I've been called worse. I've definitely been called that. But the iconography that I'm quoting here, the imagery of the 127 countries sitting down to the idolatrous banquet with Ahasuerus in the beginning of the Scroll of Esther, as a device to communicate the 128 nations that came against America in this UN resolution. I think it's the same theme, because the purpose of Ahasuerus' banquet in the Scroll of Esther was to denigrate the Jewish people and the Holy Temple. That's why he was dressed in the priestly garments. That's why he served at that sumptuous banquet from the vessels of the Holy Temple, because, as everybody knows, that opening scene in the Scroll of Esther was a celebration that the temple hadn't been rebuilt yet. And he knew that if it would be, then he would lose his power. And it was all about concealing Hashem's presence from the world. And so, too, I'm sorry if it sounds dramatic, but that's what that UN resolution was all about. Because when you come against Jerusalem, I mean, you need to really be deranged to do that, because God makes it very, very clear what Jerusalem means to him. And not only that, what it should mean to every person in the world who cherishes life, because it's the secret of peace, it's the secret of wellness, it's the secret of healing. And so to come against Jerusalem means to attempt to keep the light of God concealed, and to attempt to be in control, and to oust God, as it has always been throughout history. And thus, when we fast on Thursday for the siege against Jerusalem, we are taking a step towards the rebuilding of Jerusalem, because we never forget, because we are totally connected, because everything that we do is around Jerusalem and around the Holy Temple. And nothing's changed. I mean, it's just incredible how absolutely nothing has changed. It's the same battle.
Same battle. Not only is the fast coming on the 10th, but Israel announced, for whatever it's worth, Israel announced they're going to be building 300 new apartments in Gilo, which is an integral part of the city of Jerusalem, which the foreign media and hostile nations like to depict as some kind of a settlement that somehow is
Israel went and basically said, you know what, caution to the wind, because we could never announce that we're building anything under Obama. But since Trump said, well, listen, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, even though he had previously said maybe we should wait on the building. But we're not talking about some isolated community here, which the world calls a settlement. We're talking about apartment buildings in the southernmost neighborhood of the city of Jerusalem, the municipality. Al Jazeera had a headline. It says it says that Israel government is announcing construction of 300 settlement units. Settlement units. How could you have a settlement unit in the city of Jerusalem? Because they view our presence in Jerusalem as some sort of illegal settlement. And that's what these 128 nations were saying.
And it is illegal, and we're aliens here. And I can't contradict anything you said, Rabbi. It is only because they don't like the fact that there's a God in the world. and this is a city where his presence resides, and they just that just is
That's
sticks in
too
the throat.
much. That's too much. Jimmy Morales, if you're listening, President of Guatemala, I want to extend to you an invitation for Shabbos. You can come and stay with me and my family. Be a welcome guest at the Shabbat table. Ask Amber and Kyle. They had a great time. And
take you up to the Temple
come
Mount.
and I'll take you up on the Temple Mount. I'll give you the grand tour of Jerusalem. I'll even pay for your fare on the light rail. All because you're my kind of guy.
Wow.
And Yitzchak likes your flag.
A beautiful flag, beautiful people. We love Guatemala. And with that, Rabbi, the music is going to be starting any moment now. So once again, kudos to the few good men.
Kudos
and
to
women who stand
Hashem
up
for choosing Jerusalem and sticking by us for 2,000 years.
For the few good men and women
exile.
who stand up and take a stand and aren't afraid and speak the truth. And with that, I think we're going to bring our Temple Talk edition of the 8th of Tevet, 5778, to a close. Thank you for being with us. Temple Talk.